Marco Mendicino is the Minister of Public Safety. He's in Ottawa. Minister Mendicino, the opposition and members of the families of Flight 752, they've been calling for your government to list the IRGC as a terrorist entity, but today's announcement doesn't do that. Why did you choose this path?
Well, the first thing I want to point out is we announced today new and comprehensive sanctions that we will be pursuing, which are targeted, which are principled, and which are among the most powerful provisions under the Immigration Refugee Protection Act that will not only sanction the IRGC through designation, but the entirety of the Iranian regime itself. And this will allow us to zero in on those who are most responsible for the transgressions of human rights, which have impacted women and some of the most vulnerable groups around the world. And we stand with the women who have been marching in the streets of Tehran and Iran elsewhere. We stand with all of the protesters in Canada who are marching for human rights. And today is another concrete step in a long list of sanctions which we have delivered to ensure that Canada will never be a safe haven for anyone who wants to advance the Iranian regime's interests.
But the Deputy Prime Minister called the IRGC a terrorist organization today, but you've not given it that legal designation. So I wonder if you can explain to Canadians who have been asking for this why it's not listed as an official terrorist entity under the Criminal Code.
Well, they are terrorists, and the provisions that we are using under IRPA have been sparingly used and reserved for some of the most egregious violations of human rights and genocide in Bosnia, in Rwanda, and elsewhere. And I want to be clear with your viewers that this is a sanction with teeth, and we are going to aggressively pursue and target the senior members of not only the IRGC, but the regime and other tentacles within that so-called government so that we can hold them accountable. We're also going to expand significantly economic sanctions so that we can freeze and seize assets. And as part of today's announcement, you heard the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister say that we're allocating $76 million for frontline law enforcement so that we can be sure Canada will never be used as a stomping ground for those who think that this is a place where they can advance terrorism or violations of human rights. We will never allow that to happen.
So this is to beef up the RCMP. It's going to create a sanctions bureau inside Global Affairs Canada. But, you know, these things are going to take time to stand up. That capacity is going to take a while to build. It's been over 1,000 days since Iran shot down Flight 752. I mean, why have we gotten to this point where you're only now starting this? Because there's been some criticism that Canada lags in its ability to enforce financial crimes and enforce sanctions, and we've been struggling with it throughout the whole Russia crisis and now this.
Well, I stood with families and stood with other grieving members of the Iranian community here in Canada at the downing of PS 752. And far from lagging, we did everything that we possibly could at the time to support families by allowing them to grieve with lost loved ones, repatriating their bodies, by creating family reunification pathways, by allowing for Iranians who'd lost loved ones in the downing of PS 752 to come to Canada and to stay here permanently. That is part of the ongoing effort that we have been advancing, delivering sanctions over and above that. And today is another devastating blow to the Iranian regime, because we are resorting to a power that is fit for purpose. And by that, I mean designating not just one branch in the IRGC. The IRGC is absolutely a terrorist organization, but the entirety of the regime itself. And this will give us, again, very targeted, principled, and powerful powers to hold those accountable.
But, you know, some of the family members of Flight 752 say that Canada has become a safe haven for IRGC members. I wonder, do we even know how many IRGC officers and senior members or people connected to them are in Canada or trying to come to Canada?
Well, our law enforcement and public safety partners are always vigilant against the potential for foreign interference, and that's why the $76 million that we have announced today will go towards those frontline agencies to make sure, again, that we will ensure that Canada is not a safe haven, that if you are here to thinking that you're going to use accounts or assets to advance the violation of human rights, to stop a woman from expressing herself in the way that what she wears and what she says and what she believes, it's wrong. And so that's why we've taken this additional step and put some real substance behind the ability and the capacity to enforce these sanctions. So we know that there is a lot of angst within the community. And quite frankly, we understand that and we get that. And we are standing in solidarity with the community here and the women in Iran to say, we will walk with you, we will march with you, and we will do whatever is necessary to defend your rights.
What about Iranians who are already in Canada who might have a connection with the regime? I mean, how does the measures announced today, and I know we're going to get more details next week, how are they affected by this? I mean, could you deport some people, seize their assets? How are they affected by this announcement today?
Well, precisely. And under the IRPA, once you've designated a regime, you can prescribe senior officials, again, the ones who are the architects behind human rights violations from ever being able to come to Canada again. And it's a decision that is permanent, which means forever, which means you will never be able to set foot on Canadian soil. And that's why we believe that this is a more appropriate tool at this time. We're going to continue to leave all options on the table, but right now we believe this is the best suite of comprehensive measures that will deliver yet another significant blow to the Iranian regime for their human rights violations. And we will continue to do whatever we can to support the community to uphold human rights.
Minister Marco Mendicino, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's the government's take, but do today's measures go far enough? We're going to turn now to the opposition for their reaction on this. Tim Uppal is the Conservative Deputy Leader. Heather McPherson is the NDP's Foreign Affairs Critic. Both are in Edmonton. Thank you so much for joining me, gang. Mr. Uppal, I'd like to start with you. Do you think today's measures go far enough?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is an organization that has killed Canadians. 55 Canadians have been killed. Permanent residents were killed, and they have terrorized others. They should not be able to just get away with this type of a listing. Canadians across the country have been calling on this government to list them as a terrorist organization, stop them from being able to plan in Canada, stop them from being able to fundraise in Canada. And this just doesn't do it. They have not done it. They have failed Canadians on this matter.
We've seen some reaction, Mr. Uppal, from some experts on this. Thomas Junot, who is a professor at the University of Ottawa, he said the criminal code designation listing them as a terrorist organization would have been unenforceable, and what was announced today will be more effective and is more surgical. Jess Davis, who's a global surgical security expert, says this is in fact better than the terrorist designation because of the permanent bans and the targeting of the regime. How do you respond to that analysis of what the government did today?
Well, right now what they're saying is that they've listed 50% of the overall IRGC. So there's still 10,000 of them that will be able to come to Canada. I think at the end of the day, what Canadians have been asking for, and what other countries have already done, other countries have listed the RGC as terrorist organization. That is what Canadians expect, is for their government to stand with them in this case. So it will, and other organizations, other terrorist organizations that we consider terrorists, are listed as terrorist organizations. So why have they listed other organizations as terrorist organizations and not this one? Canadians want the IRGC listed as a terrorist organization. And that's what this government should have done. But unfortunately, they're just not taking that step.
Heather McPherson, what's your reaction to what the government did today?
You know, for me, the thing that I always think about, it was many Edmontonians that were on that flight on PS 752. It was one of the very first things that happened when I was elected as a member of Parliament. And, such a heartbreaking thing for our entire community, something that we still haven't gotten over. So for me to be able to see the slowness of this and how long it has taken to just do the very bare minimum. This week, I'd asked the government to put Magnitsky sanctions in place. So of course, I'm glad to see that they did that they have sanctioned those people. That, to start with 25 and 9 entities, not enough. To start to be looking at a sanction regime and looking at making sure that they're enforceable now, not enough. My goodness, we have a war in Ukraine. We've had sanctions, and I have been calling on the government for a better enforcement of the sanctions, more clarity, more transparency of our sanction regime. And it's only now that we're saying, we should probably look at this. Way too little, way too late. The government needed to have acted much faster. It's been 1,000 and some days.
Well, there is $76 million here to create a sanctions bureau inside Global Affairs
But that's going to take years to put in place.
Well, this was going to be my question. I mean, this plus the increased capacity at the RCMP, it's not like you just announced the $76 million and it's rolled into effectiveness, the next day. They're promising us more details next week, Ms. McPherson. What would you need to hear from the government next week to get more comfort in what they've rolled out today?
Well, I mean, frankly, I am so suspicious of this government with regards to sanctions. They are extremely good at announcing things. They are not extremely good at actually putting those things into practice. I have had order paper questions, access to information, all sorts of things, trying to get information about the Ukrainian sanctions. So when I hear them rattle off sanctions, I don't necessarily believe that they are being enforced. So when I get this plan, I need to see timelines. I need those timelines to be urgent. I mean, what is happening in Iran? We have women that are risking their lives this minute, this day, for the rights of them, their rights, but for our rights for women across the world. This can't wait 3 years. This can't wait for the Liberals to finally get their acting gear. Like, they have to get this done. It should have been done years and years ago. So I'm going to need to see some really aggressive timelines. I'm going to need to see some real aggressive action happening, not just these announcements and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't help Iranians. That doesn't help the people that need the help from Canada right now.
Mr. Uppal, I'd like to just pivot back to the terrorist designation that you want, if I can, because the government has not done a great job of explaining to us when we've asked the questions of why not do this. You do see people speaking, on background that they want to avoid the collateral damage. There is forced military service and conscription in Iran, and people could end up having to serve in the IRGC at a very low rank and not actually be part of the leadership that is behind some of the more heinous acts of this organization. With this attempt to target the top 50%, as they call it, of the leadership, that's, as Thomas Juneau called it, that more surgical approach. Does that not make more sense to avoid the collateral damage of people who are conscripted into the lower ranks and really have no choice but to serve, even if they don't support the regime?
The fact of the matter is that other countries have listed the IRGC as a terrorist organization.
But with different rules, different systems in other countries, right?
Yeah, we have listed other organizations, many of them as a terrorist organization as well. These are things that we could figure the details out as in addition to that after the fact. But the important thing is that we should get them listed. And I know my friend in the NDP is saying that she'd like to get action faster. Well, then they need to stop supporting the Liberals and support us. And
Tim, to be fair, we can't get food aid to Afghanistan right now because there's no humanitarian carve out.
And so
there is real consequences,
and that should be fixed.
When you do megaphone politics.
What we don't say is to say, let's not list them. We could fix the problem, but let's list them as a terrorist organization, stop them from being able to operate in Canada, stop them from being able to raise money in Canada, stop them from being able to plan in Canada, and then we could fix other issues that come with that.
But Mr. Uppal, is that not something that is achievable now with the measures rolled out today? I mean, we've seen some national global security experts saying that this is a better way than just listing it as a terrorist organization because there could be collateral damage of innocent people caught up in this, and you create a whole other type of mess to deal with by just labeling them a terrorist, even if they had no choice but to put on the uniform.
What we have right now is an announcement by the Liberals. So we have seen time and time again that announcement by this government does not actually mean action. So no, it is not enough. And what Canadians have asked for is for the IRGC to be listed as a terrorist organization. They don't want to see the IRGC raising money in Canada. They don't want them to be able to operate here. That's what we need to do to stop. We need to ban them. And then the other issues that come up after that, we can deal with that. If the NDP was to support us in Parliament, we'd be able to address that maybe legislatively.
Ms. McPherson, you mentioned humanitarian aid, and obviously there is a great need for that and to support people inside the regime. But how do you accomplish that while also trying to exert the pressure on at the very top of the Iranian politics?
Well, I mean, I think it's very easy. We have to use every tool we can to punish the top of the IRGC, the people that are causing the harm, the suffering, the people that are murdering their own citizens, murdering Canadian citizens as well. Those are the people we need to be targeting. We need to be making sure that they are paying for it. But I will say, Afghanistan is a perfect example. There are 23 million people in Afghanistan that don't have enough food right now. And Canadian organizations can't help because the Canadian government hasn't fixed the legislation to be able to do that. They haven't done a humanitarian carve-out. So the fact that we can't fix the legislation, the fact that this government won't fix the holes makes me very, very worried about watching them implement sanctions, watching them implement to declare other governments as a terrorist organization. I'm very concerned that they're actually just making these announcements and that they're not going to follow through with doing the hard work of fixing those gaps, fixing those holes, because it's been over a year since Kabul fell and that gap has not been fixed.
Mr. Uppal,
other countries have fixed it. Other countries have fixed that gap.
Of course, other countries have fixed it, but we haven't. Canada hasn't.
We should be able to do
it as well.
The Liberals haven't. And so now, again, all we have now is an announcement from this government. We could list them as terrorist organization and then go and fix legislation on anything that we feel that needs to be addressed. Why are we not listing?
I think all tools should be on the table, 100%.
Okay, Mr. Uppal, just one quick question.
And they should definitely fix that.
Okay, Mr. Uppal, one quick question before you let you go. The Prime Minister made the point today that the designation that they are imposing under the IRPA legislation on the Iranian regime is equivalent to what they did with Bosnia and with Rwanda for war crimes and genocide. It is a severe designation under law, and it's permanent, that the ban is forever. I mean, how is that? Is that not a significant enough measure in your view?
It doesn't go far enough. What they're doing is
a permanent forever ban?
Certain people, on individuals. It's a permanent ban on individuals. They haven't actually stopped the RGC as an organization of being able to plan, raise money in Canada, to be able to operate in Canada. That is what we're asking for. So this government has not gone far enough.
Okay. We've gone as far as we can. We're out of time. I want to thank you both very much. Tim Uppal and Heather McPherson, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.